Hello and welcome to Reporters on France 24. I'm James Creedon. Now this week we take you to Hong Kong. For 3 long months an unprecedented protest movement has been taking place in the former British colony. Every weekend hundreds of thousands of people spill into the streets demanding, amongst other things, the withdrawal of an extradition law to the Chinese mainland and the introduction of direct universal suffrage. The report you're about to see by our correspondent in China will take you to the very heart of that protest movement. Antoine Védaillet reports.
This has become somewhat of a usual scene in Hong Kong in the last 3 months. Black-clad crowds flooding the streets of the city, a population determined to make its voice heard.
When I see all the people around me, I tell myself that this movement is still giving people a lot of hope.
Nam is 26 years old. He's an assistant in a law firm, and since the protest movement started, he hasn't missed a single demonstration. In early June, he was marching against a now suspended bill that would have allowed extraditions to mainland China. His demands are now much more wide-ranging.
We have 5 demands: full withdrawal of the extradition law, that the riot characterization be removed, that all charges against protesters be lifted, an inquiry into police brutality, and universal suffrage.
The 5 demands are a mantra for the movement. These are specific, but more widely, protesters feel that their rights, freedoms, and identity are being threatened by Beijing. The central government is their enemy, and this summer's struggle is their last chance.
If we lose this battle, every protest in the future will be harder and harder to organize, and we'll see Beijing's evil hand take even more importance in Hong Kong.
The pro-Beijing Hong Kong government hasn't given in to the protesters, and now hope has given way to anger. Disillusioned young Hong Kongers are spearheading the revolt, regularly clashing with police. At times, the former British colony has been the scenes of urban guerrilla warfare. How did Hong Kong get to this point? What are the roots of this anger that's been brewing for years? Why has the city become a symbol of anti-Beijing rebellion? Our team followed Hong Kong's insurgents in their summer of revolt.
Fight for freedom!
It labels itself Asia's world city, complete with tycoons, banks, and luxury boutiques. But look past the glossy exterior, and you'll see Hong Kong's other side. Far from downtown, Nam finishes his workday.
We're in Sham Shui Po. This is where I live. It's one of the poorest neighborhoods in Hong Kong.
Thousands of people live in tiny apartments in the rundown buildings of these narrow streets. This is the Hong Kong he knows.
This is my apartment. Here's my bathroom. My living room. And here's my room. This is where I sleep and work, and that's it.
13 square meters for 700 euros a month. That's more than half his wage, but it's all Nam can afford. Finding housing in Hong Kong has become near impossible. On average, 1 square meter is worth 25,000 euros. He believes that only a democratically elected government can fight social inequality.
If the government had to be accountable to Hong Kong citizens in order to get their votes, they would have to control rent prices, to do something for the people instead of contributing to deepening inequalities between rich and poor.
A feeling of disenfranchisement that fuels bitterness and dissent.
I'm convinced that the movement has become what it is because a lot of people are protesting not just against the extradition law, but also because of deeper problems like housing or employment. Because of that, young people like me don't have any hope for their future in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong's young people have used the protest movement as an outlet for their disenchantment. To make sure their voices are heard, some have chosen a more aggressive approach. This couple in their 20s is planning their next move. They monitor the situation outside on encrypted messaging app Telegram.
We're trying to see where it's dangerous and where it's quiet. Then we identify where the protesters are and where we can gather. We're taking the metro now.
They get live updates of the situation on their phones on their way.
50 anti-riot police in Wong Tai Sin.
This is where Alan and Carrie have decided to go. Upon arrival, they put on their protester uniform. Black clothes, safety glasses, and gas masks. Behind them, others are trying to build barricades in the middle of the road. Police is just a few meters away.
I think being peaceful, rational, non-violent just doesn't really accomplish anything in a way. I'd rather be brave and fight. I think it's more useful because I can be even more involved.
Police is here, they're getting closer. They're coming, they're coming.
To clear protesters, police no longer hesitate to use force. Since the start of the movement, they've fired hundreds of rounds of tear gas and beanbags and been involved in hand-to-hand combat. Levels of violence unprecedented in Hong Kong. That night, police made dozens of arrests. But Alan and Carrie were able to flee the scene.
I feel exhausted and of course scared every time. I'm sure that no one enjoys escaping dangerous situations like this one. But as long as the government doesn't respond to our demands, we will continue to protest. I would really love to lead a normal life. Spend time with my family, my girlfriend, with myself. But all of us here have sacrificed this for several months.
Protesters arrested during these clashes could face up to 10 years in prison. In Hong Kong, the situation keeps spiraling out of control week after week. Those loyal to Beijing have also decided to make their voice heard. Some gather peacefully, others have chosen a more forceful approach. On several instances, supporters of the central government have physically targeted pro-democracy protesters, just like in this subway station. This collective beating is the work of the Wo Triad, a criminal organization involved in prostitution, drugs, and the arms trade. One of their former members accepted to speak to us on condition of anonymity. He showed us where he operated for 6 years.
The warehouse we just passed, that's where we stored drugs and weapons. It's also where we got together.
He says he has witnessed collusion between crime bosses and police in this neighborhood. He believes the attack in the metro could only have happened with a tacit approval of authorities.
I don't know who ordered the attack, but what I do know is that the triads and police communicated beforehand. What happens is that the triads inform the police that they have to conduct business, and if there's no objection, triad members get together and do what they plan to do. The government allows these kind of incidents to happen so that Hong Kongers feel society is divided. Faced with these divisions, the chief executive can then say Hong Kong is in a state of chaos and ask China to intervene.
The division has caused an identity crisis pitting pro- and anti-Beijing camps, sometimes even in the same household.
Why do you hide your faces? You should protest like normal people. No need to wear helmets and masks. And by the way, where does all this equipment come from?
And Chiu is 55 years old and knew Hong Kong when it was British. Her son, David, has been protesting since the beginning of the movement. She believes the protesters are mistaken. Hong Kong's priority should be order and stability.
I'm just an ordinary person. I just want everything is peaceful. Okay, I got everything I want. I just want a peaceful life. And so that I need to support the government because they have a government to control everything. Then they can keep the living in peaceful way.
Her son is not convinced.
My mom wants the peaceful environment of Hong Kong, but in this way, the peaceful environment has to be live in the communism. Actually, all the people come over at the movement, they disagree about China. That's the thing. They don't want to control by the China. Why? Because it's about freedom. Like if the China Communist Party ruling us, we cannot have a talk like that.
After many fights, David and his mother have agreed not to talk about politics anymore. But David hasn't given up on his ideals.
So many times I stay at home and feel sad. After she talks something against the movement or against us, I feel sad and sometimes may want to cry. So I try to leave home and go around. After my emotions stable, I come back and pretending nothing happened anymore. But I admit that I'm always sad about her words. So, but it may not affect me to do something about the movement and fight for the freedom again.
The odds are stacked against Hong Kong's young rebels. But this summer, after months of struggle, they say that nothing will ever be the same again. And they promise to fight till the bitter end in what they're calling the revolution of our times.
Now, to discuss more about that report, we're joined from our Beijing bureau by Charles Pellegrin. Charles, great footage in that report, and it can't have been easy to film a lot of that. Can you tell us about the conditions under which this report was filmed?
Well, it's much easier to do reporting and to do journalism in general in Hong Kong than in mainland China. People are much more eager to speak to media. This is the result of 99 years of British colonial rule and having that system in place for so long. However, we did have a few problems when we had to interview that former gang member. When Antoine and Thomas interviewed that former gang member, obviously they're involved in a criminal organization, so that was a bit trickier. They had to change the location of the interview quite a few different times.
Now, Charles, we know about the political demands of protesters, but are there other factors that have caused them all to spill into the streets and all of these numbers? For example, the big rising cost of living in Hong Kong right now.
There are really deep inequalities in Hong Kong with quite a few select families that control the economy that are what we call tycoons, and the rest of the population of 7 million who are really struggling with very high rents. It's mentioned in the report that the square meter in Hong Kong is worth 25,000 euros, and with low wages as well, and not much has been done to reduce these inequalities. So these protesters believe that getting university universal suffrage and getting a hold of their political life will enable them to enact the economic policies that will tackle these inequalities. And actually, this has been really one of the things that have fueled the dissent in Hong Kong, in addition to the lack of response from the government. And just as an example of that anger in Hong Kong, we have the soundbite that we're about to listen to of one of the protesters we met called Annam. Take a listen.
At the start of the protest, the world could see that we had over 1 million people take to the streets. We were full of hope. We thought that the movement would succeed and that we would get what we wanted. Instead, after more than 2 months of protests, we're filled with anger because in spite of our actions, the government still hasn't responded to a single one of our demands. And on top of that, it started using excessive force to silence us.
And Charles, there's no sign of this movement dying down. Beijing doesn't seem to know how to proceed. What's next and where is all this likely to go?
Well, it's hard to predict what the outcome of this conflict is going to be because, on one hand, the protesters are going to keep going in the street, making their 5 demands, protesting so long as they don't have any response from the government. But Carrie Lam, the chief executive in Hong Kong, and the authorities behind her in Beijing are not planning on caving into any of these demands. So we can sort of see this situation sort of keep spiraling out of control weekend after weekend, protest after protest, and instance of police brutality after instance of police brutality, and instance of protester brutality after instance of protest brutality. So it's going to be interesting to see how in the next few weeks and months, how this situation is going to evolve, and whether or not this is going to continue dividing public opinion in Hong Kong, like we're going to see in the report with one particular family that's been divided between generations, with one side that's staunchly in favor of stability and the other side that wants really a revolution in Hong Kong and real direct universal suffrage.
Okay, Charles Pellegrin in Beijing, thank you so much for that. And thanks to you at home for watching. Do stay tuned.